Ishin no Arashi or Storm of Reformation is a historical simulation game released by Koei way back in 1988 for the PC-98 computer. Notably, it was released only a few years after the debut of Koei's two longest running series, Nobunaga's Ambition and Romance of the Three Kingdoms, specifically 5 years for the former and mere 3 years after the latter. Yet, those two series still live on and see somewhat regular releases even to this date, while Ishin no Arashi is, well, I'd like to say the series is dead and forgotten, but in a Famitsu interview with the producer of Rise of the Ronin, Yoshida P., the interviewer specifically name-drops the series, so I don't think it's all that forgotten, just virtually unknown outside of Japan. The game takes place at the tail end of the Edo period, where Japan saw huge changes to its political and social system. After around 250 years of almost total isolation from the rest of the world, a series of events led to this dude, Commodore Perry, mobilizing a giant fleet of black ships to Tokyo Bay in July 1853 and threatening to open fire if Japan did not open borders for foreigners to come in. Seeing no other choice, the Japanese government reluctantly agreed to open trade with foreign countries as demanded, while also making military preparation in case something goes awry later down the line. This chain of events forced a change in the way Japanese people think and act because they risk losing their entire country to foreign influence if they don't do anything. But doing anything reckless would make the matters even worse. Now back to the game. The game offers 3 scenarios. The first one is January of 1858, the second one is May of 1863, the third one is November of 1868. Each scenario offers 9 main characters for you to play as, with those 9 characters being divided into 3 different ideology parties. The far left is the Sabaku ideology, which supports the shogun maintaining military power. The far right is the Sono ideology, which supports the emperor to take away the shogun's military power into the emperor's own hands. And the middle is the Koei ideology, which is everyone getting along with each other, I guess. The literal meaning of the word is public opinion, and I am not politically intelligent enough to know what that means. The goal of the game is to unite all 13 feudal domains under one ideology of the character you choose. You can do this by traveling around Japan, debating and befriending various different sorts of characters ranging from mere civilians to wandering Ronins and to feudal lords. The debate is carried out via a minigame that looks like this. Okay, I am not going to pretend that I really understand what's going on here. All I could figure out is that there are 5 topics that you and your opponent can choose as ammos, and depending on the type of ammo the two of you currently have, the argument can go your way or the other. You can change the topics anytime you want, but there is a limited number of times you can change the topic. There is this bar here that can be filled up by mashing the enter key repeatedly, and once it's filled up all the way, your character will shoot a barrage of arguments for a short time, earning you a huge advantage. There is also a stamina bar right here. Once it's empty, you can't make any more arguments and will have to sit through whatever the opponent throws at you. The stamina bar is carried over between most arguments and will only be refilled after a day has passed. Speaking of which, each day is divided into 4 phases: morning, noon, dusk, and evening. The coolest thing about the game is that the whole world constantly moves and acts together with you. Every time you make an action, the phase changes and you can see characters on screen move around and maybe out of your field of view. In the corner of the screen, you can even see reports of whatever was happening across Japan too. While you are just going around from store to store, at the other end of the country, someone might have been persuaded to change their ideology or just got assassinated or something. A lot of things can happen in the game. You might go into a temple, be greeted by some Ronin asking to join your cause. You might bump into some big shot in the middle of the road, and instead of trying to persuade him, you can choose to cut him down right then and there with a dueling minigame. In a duel, you can move left or right, attack or parry high, mid or low. The dueling is surprisingly very fun compared to the persuade one in my opinion. If you and your opponents have followers at the moment, then the followers will automatically duke it out first before you have to step in. If you play as a character that aren't pro shogun, you may even find yourself at the mercy of the shogun soldiers who jump at you whenever you cross a checkpoint. There are a lot of things going on in this game and I really like it. On paper, I'm gonna be honest here, the game was originally released in 1988. I am not the target audience of this game, so everything just feels very awkward. So being the lazy bum that I am, I only played the game just enough to get the footage I needed to make this video. Fortunately, the game apparently did well enough to receive ports to various other platforms, including an updated port for the NES in 1990 and a full-blown remake for the PlayStation 1 and Sega Saturn in 1997 and 1998, both of which are Japanese only, which is why probably most of the world doesn't know of the series' existence. However, NES version did receive a fan translation by someone named Clickbait in January 2022, which is why you are seeing English on screen here. As the author puts it, the translation is only about 70% finished, so there are a few graphical glitches or translation inconsistent here and there, but all of the menus and most of the characters' names are in English now. If you're interested in the series but know not Japanese, then this is probably your best chance at trying the game out. However, with a change in platform comes many changes in gameplay. The debate minigame has been changed so that button mashing is no longer required. Debating is now fully turn-based, with each turn requiring you to choose a combination of mood, theme, and topic to argue with your opponent. And the logic as to what loses or wins over what completely eludes me. Like, this guy has Koei ideology and yet he says Koei sucks. What the hell? Dueling has been reduced to poor stat checking and completely RNG. The follower system was also removed, so now it feels a lot less things happen while you are traveling around. Overall, I think while the NES port is more accessible, it is a rather watered down version of the original game with pretty much no improvement whatsoever unfortunately. The only improved thing about it is its price, which was a whopping 11,800 yen or around 92 USD today if accounting for inflation. Apparently, even back in the day, the game's reception was kinda mixed, with Famitsu scoring the NES version 25 out of 40 points, saying that while the game offers a very unique experience, a system of meeting and persuading characters to join your cause is too complex for your average player. This did not discourage Koei though, because as pointed out earlier, it did eventually get a remake and even sequels later down the line. But more importantly, the game kickstarted a sub-series for Koei called Retrospective, consisting of series that combine tactical simulation with role-playing elements, making for a more personal experience with the game's settings and its characters, differentiating the series with its more famous brothers like Nobunaga's Ambition and Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which focuses solely on the grand scale of warfare, at least at the time. This Retrospective series would go on to have the following games under its umbrella: Ishin no Arashi, Uncharted Warriors, Taiko Resident, Inindo, Way of the Ninja,
Söldnerschild,
Kamigami no Daichi Kojiki Gaiden, and Progenitor. The last two series are so obscure that they don't even have their own Wikipedia pages. Fast forward a little bit to 1997, a remake of the game was released for the Sega Saturn and PlayStation 1. This remake was based on the NES version, so still no random followers, but the rest of the game was massively overhauled and improved. For starters, each character now begins the game with a small scene explaining the current situation of Japan and why the character needs to set out on a journey to talk everyone else into submission. You can now actually see the limit of your character's movement and whether a building holds any important character or not, which makes for a much smoother experience just moving your character around. Raising stats via a school or dojo now comes with a small minigame where you have to pick one from a random number of cards. The performance you get get is based on the card you picked, which could range from excellent to normal to fail, and the higher your current stat is, the easier it is to pick up the fail card. This, while not seeming much, makes for a more fun time than just simply clicking the same few buttons over and over again. Dueling still mostly relies on stats and RNG, but you now can choose high, mid or low stance each swing, so it at least is a game of rock, paper, scissors now. The biggest change to the game is its completely new debate system. As you can see here, debating is now carried out through a game of cards. At the beginning of the debate, a random topic is chosen. Depending on the topic and the character stats, the first player can put down in the middle certain type of cards, question or suggest. If your opponent plays out a question card, then you must counter with an answer card. If your opponent plays out a suggest card, then you must counter with an object card. The different color of the card indicates the attitude your character employs, but that's not very important. Aside from those 4 types of cards, there are also other various special cards like distracting your opponent so you can throw away free cards and get 3 new ones in their place, or a card that can replace the current middle card with a random one, or a card that can somehow make your opponents feel stomachache plus forfeiting their turn, etc. Once you put down a card in the middle, you can choose to discard any number of cards you have on hand to get new ones, but each new drawn card is 1 more spirit cost. If you run out of spirit, you won't be able to play any more cards unless you manage to draw a special card that restores your spirit. The more cards are stacked in the middle, the more you will be able to swing the argument in your favor once you eventually win. The debate lasts until the candle runs out, which should be around 10 pounds unless someone plays a special card that prolongs the candle's life. So in short, it is a rather special kind of Uno and a pretty fun one in my opinion. Though because debate is pretty much the main type of gameplay, it could get really repetitive pretty fast if you can't quite click with it. Overall, this remake is the most polished version of Ishin no Arashi, and if it weren't for the fact that the game is Japanese only, I would recommend that if you were to be interested in the game, check out this version over the other ones. After the remake was released, a few months later in May of 1998, a brand new entry to the series came out titled Ishin no Arashi Bakumatsu Shishiden, meaning Storm of Reformation, Tale of Patriarchs of the Bakumatsu. The game was first released for PC and only received a PlayStation 1 release a few months later, and apparently there are a few changes in gameplay, graphic and story events between the 2 versions, but for convenience sake this video will only talk about the PlayStation 1. Unlike the first installment, which plays more like a sandbox with very bare minimum story elements, the second one plays more like an adventure game with a very big focus on story and characters. The number of playable characters has been reduced to just 3, Sakamoto Ryoma, who stars in 1857, Hijikata Toshizo, who stars in 1862, and the last third is a custom character who also stars in 1862 just like Hijikata. The arrival of the Black Ships was only a backstory in the previous title, but in this one it was given a proper event scene and served as the introduction to Roma's scenario. It even got an animated sequence just to show how important its arrival is. I forgot where I heard this from, but I remember someone saying that the Japanese seeing the Black Ships for the first time was probably like that alien arrival scene in Independence Day, and yeah, this animated scene really has that vibe. If you're a long-time fan of Koei, as soon as you start a scenario, the first thing you may notice is its soundtrack. That is because the sound director of the game is Sasaki Masayoshi, better known by his nickname Masa. Masa already contributed his work to another Koei game called Soul Master, but this game is the first time Masa works as a sound director. He would then go on to direct the majority of various game soundtracks and coin the iconic guitar riff and energetic rock style that the franchise is well known for. crazy how his style is already so defined even this early on in his career. Now back to the game. The dueling minigame is still here and has been redesigned to be more in line with the original game instead of just rock paper scissors. Though now you have to manage a Ki gauge which decreases every time you do an attack and can only be raised by a momentary yell. In short, it is now a game of poor footsies. However, you probably won't be able to experience this minigame much unfortunately because it can only happen via a story event or if a dojo master allowing it, which isn't all that common of a thing. Debate is still a card game but has a completely new system now. The cards you can use are events that have happened all over Japan, categorized into very distinct categories like events involving the current state of Japan, events regarding the foreigners, etc. Once a topic has been decided at the start of a turn, only cards of that topic can be used. Each card has a number to it, probably to indicate how big or important the event was, and this number goes down as time passes, to the point where an event is so old news that you can no longer use the card. Because of this, you need to somewhat constantly update your deck by either befriending characters and asking them to share information from time to time, or visiting a bunch of places to gather information yourself. After you have chosen an event card to play, you need to choose an attitude card from 5 random cards you have on hand. Weak attitude gives 5 more points, mild attitude gives 10 more, and strong attitude gives 20 more. There are also chances to get some special cards like ignoring the opponent's argument to minimize its effect, or joking around and wasting a turn, etc. Overall, I think the new debate card game is a very well designed one that requires more strategy than the previous ones, as you must know what kind of topic your opponent likes information on and capitalizing on it. Sometimes you may even have to purposely lose the first few turns to save the best cards for use later. Speaking of purposely losing, after a debate is over, depending on the cards used and who the winner was, the ideology of both the participants will be affected. If you play the game normally, then Roma will easily be a full supporter of Sono ideology, and Hijikata will be a full supporter of Sabaku, and this will usually lead the two down their historical ends. To be able to get different endings, you need to carefully choose choices at various points throughout the story and pay attention to the ideology of both the character and the trending ideology of the rest of Japan, meaning you may need to lose on purpose sometimes to not let your character's ideology swings to the extreme. A new system added in this game is the field battle, which plays out like a standard SRPG. This type of battle can be triggered by choosing to cut someone you meet on the road, but I find that option doesn't work most of the time because the game keeps telling me that it would be a really bad idea to do so. So most of the footage I have on screen here are from story events and most are from Hijikata's scenario. Ryuma's scenario is pretty simple all things considered, so there are very few battle scenes like this, while Hijikata's scenario involves the Shinsengumi getting into conflict with other factions, so he gets into battle a lot, and because of that and a few other reasons, I think Hijikata's scenario is a lot more engaging than Ryuma's. Both scenarios start out rather similar to each other, with both Ryuma and Hijikata training in a dojo in Edo, but Ryuma spends most of his time at Edo just training and occasionally gets events introducing other important characters and not really much else. There is a lot of downtime where you don't really have anything to do aside from just wandering around and maybe pass the time by studying or something, and studying looks like this. After finishing his training, Ryoma goes back to his hometown of Tosa and gets completely cut off from the rest of Japan, so there are even less things to do there. It is not until his friend Takeshi Hanbei formed the Tosa Imperialism Army with the goal of restoring power for the emperor did Roma's story really get going. And even then, Roma just doesn't seem very main character-ish for most of the time, at least for me. He just kinda goes with the flow and does whatever other characters tell him to do. One really egregious example is when Hanbei tells Ryoma to go to Edo to assassinate this dude, Katsukaishu. Ryoma goes there, launches around the dojo he previously trained at, and it's not until his friend Chibachutaro tells him that he is going to assassinate this dude did Ryoma goes, "Oh, what coincidence, me too actually, let's go kill him together then." Then when the two of them get to Kaishu's home, Kaishu tells them, "Wait, don't kill me, listen to what I have to say first." Ryoma immediately does a 180 and asks the dude to be his teacher. Granted, this is prehistorically accurate, but the way it is depicted in the game just makes Ryoma seem rather passive and undecisive. In contrast, Hijikata is a part of a faction from the start. They aren't quite the Shinsengumi yet, but Hijikata gets to see action quite soon after the interaction is over. And while not the leader of the group himself, Hijikata is not just some lackey, instead plays a major role in keeping the group in check. And when the group becomes the Shinsengumi that we all know of, he becomes the captain of his own team and very active in carrying out some of his historical events. Overall, Bakumatsu Shishiden seems like a rather confusing installment that got held back by its ambition. It has a lot of improvements and unique changes in its core gameplay, but the focus on historical events that naturally happens when the right time comes means if you just want to see how the story plays out, you don't really need to engage with most of the game system. When you do engage with the system though, everything is just too slow and sluggish, and it's not a guarantee that whatever you are doing will get you anything or you are just wasting your time. I couldn't find the reviews of the game when it first came out, but reception of the people who played the games years later generally laments that the game's lack of freedom compared to previous titles as its biggest flaw. Personally, I think the game wouldn't be judged so harshly if there aren't so many menu navigation and the loading isn't so horrible. Well, fortunately, these problems I have with Bakumatsu Shishiden are mostly fixed with the next installment, Shippu Ryumaden or Tale of the Whirlwind Roma. It does have its fair share of problems though. And before we go any further, I must apologize in advance first. The game is a Nintendo DS game, and as far as I'm aware, there is no gameplay video of the game on the internet, at least on YouTube, and I am not willing to fuck around and find out when it comes to Nintendo. So what I am going to do is just replaying the trailer over and over again and show a few screenshots when I talk about certain mechanics of the game. Apologize in advance if this makes it hard to follow the video. So, Shippu Ryumaden. The game was announced at Tokyo Game Show 2010 and was one of Koei's main attractions at the event at the time. Roma got a pretty big presence in the company's booth banner, and the game got a 25-minute special stage dedicated to advertising it. Also, kinda worth pointing out, in 2010, a taiga drama centering around the lives of Roma was airing at the time. The drama was even titled somewhat similar to the game, Romaden. The drama apparently was very popular and won multiple awards. If there ever was a time to appeal the Ishin no Arashi series to a bigger audience, it was this time. But despite being one of Koei Tecmo's highlights during the 2010 Tokyo Game Show, the game stays Japanese only for some reason. Though to be fair again, this was during the time when Koei just merged with Tecmo to become Koei Tecmo. The company was going through a rather rough transition phase, and many other games released during this time also remain Japanese only, even those of more well-known series like Warrior OGZ, Nobunaga's Ambition Tendo, Dynasty Wars Rise for 2, Samurai Wars 3 Extreme Legends, and Romance of the Three Kingdoms 12, just to name a few. Now back to Shibu Romaden. As you might expect from the game being a Nintendo DS game, the scale of the game has been toned way down, and most of the game mechanics has been streamlined to be more suited for shorter play sections on the fly. Roma is now the only playable character because the title is Tale of Whirlwind Roma after all. But in exchange, the characters and events involved in Roma's life are given more care. Take for example, Roma's family was only briefly seen when he finishes his training at Edo and gets back home in the previous game, and does not really do much of anything the whole game. In this one, Roma's time with his family before setting off for his training in Edo serves as the game's tutorial. Later on, Roma's sister was the one who encouraged him to set off from Tosa to find a way to save Japan from the impending foreign influence. And for the rest of the game, Roma sends letters to her from time to time, which is very historically accurate. A lot of the downtime that hampers the previous game's pacing was also outright cut. Just a while ago, I complained that Roma's story doesn't really start until Shinbei forms the Tosa imperialism army. But to get there, you need to chuck through 15 hours of gameplay, possibly even more if you don't skip time with studying. In this game, after the few events introducing key characters, they outright time skip until the next important events. Thus, the birth of the Tosa imperialism army happens at the 3-hour mark instead of 15, thus pushing the game to be a lot more fast-paced. Though on the other hand, I feel like the previous game's slow pace kinda makes the event the result of an incredibly boiled kettle way past its limit, while in this game the event just kinda happens, especially because it comes almost immediately after a time skip. There are still exciting events beforehand leading up to the army's creation, but it just doesn't feel the same without all the time wasted going from house to house and talking with the people of Tosa. But honestly, this is just nitpicking on my part if anything. Also, this is probably just me, but some of the character designs looking rather anime-ish kinda takes me out of the story. I have nothing against anime looking characters, but most of the cast are still fairly normal looking, so the more anime looking characters really stick out like a sore thumb. Another thing that the game's faster pace fixes is Roma's character. In the previous game, I don't really like Roma as a character all that much because he just seems so passive. In this game though, after some key events, you may be given a mission to go to some place or to convince someone through a debate within a deadline, and you can choose to follow through with the mission or not. Not doing a mission just makes the flow of time much on, but it does make Roma much less of a capable protagonist. If you do follow the mission, Roma of course takes a more active role within the flow of the story and it becomes a lot more engaging. Another thing that I really like is that after triggering some events or going to the right place, you can unlock entries in the gallery, showcasing rewards, tourist attractions and encouraging you to pay the place a visit. Okay, that's fine and all, but what about the actual gameplay, you may be wondering right now? Well, there is a reason I saved this part for last, not because the actual gameplay is bad or anything, I just think that it got streamlined a little bit too much. In the previous game, the characters constantly move around, so when you get to a character's house, they might not be there. You search for them and it turns out they are in Edo Castle or something, but you can't just park inside the castle like it's some public restaurant, so you need to find some other way like befriending some high-ranking individuals in their area for example. It's honestly a rather cumbersome and annoying way to progress in the game, no small thanks to the game's loading issue, but it's kinda a way to immerse yourself into the game's settings and feel like you're just one part of the bigger picture. All that fat has been cut in this game. Before you interact with a character, you can clearly see what kind of info they will give you once you reach certain trust with them, and once you gain info of a character, said character will always be at that one place no matter how much time has passed. Characters will only move around or disappear if it's done via a story event. Also, aside from moving around in the city which doesn't cost anything, every action costs 1 day to do now. It does make the game a lot faster paced and absolutely needed for a game on the Nintendo DS, but it also kinda loses some of the game's original personality. At least they finally put back the feature where you can be randomly attacked by the Shogun's followers, which has been missing since the original game, and the dueling system remains pretty similar to the previous title, so it's still pretty fun. And lastly, but most importantly, the debate system.
Oh no, no, no.
Yeah, it's pretty much just rock, paper, scissors. It has elements that give it more depth than your average game of rock, paper, scissors, like the importance of stat difference or special cards that isn't rock or paper or scissors. But it really is not enough to make me think this is not just a game of rock, paper, scissors. Again, I get that this is to make the game more suited to be played in short bursts, but the last two games have very creative and fun kind of unique card games, so I was rather disappointed when I saw this new debate system, especially so considering this is the last title in the series. It has been 14 years since Shibu Rumaden released. Only the original game was ported to Steam in 2017 as part of Shibusawa Co's Historical Archive bundle, and no new entry has been made, though probably not for the lack of trying. In 2022, when Koei Tecmo announced the HD remaster of Taiko Rishiden 5, Ichigoya Kazuhiro, producer of the title, said that it was his dream to revive the Ishin no Arashi series, but seeing as the title probably won't sell well overseas, that dream will remain just a dream. With the recently released titles like a Dragon, Ishin, and Rise of the Ronin, non-Japanese people are increasingly becoming more aware of the Bakumatsu period, as well as the period's key people like Sakamoto Roma and Ishin Sengumi. Perhaps Koei Tecmo will someday capitalize on this and release a new entry for Ishin no Arashi. And when that time comes somehow, I want there to be enough interest from the non-Japanese fan base to make Koei Tecmo localize the title. There really isn't any other game like this series where the focus is not on combat, but on traveling around the world, gathering information and engaging in debate with all the characters to win, so it would be a waste for the series to just die out like this. Plus, we really need more games with the Bakumatsu beers as its settings. I usually don't like shooting my stuff, but Ishin no Arashi is a rather obscure series, and making this retrospective takes a lot more time than it really should have, and even then, most of the things I said in this video are very surface level stuff. If you find this video to be informative and would also want there to be new entry to the series in the future, please do share this video around, and maybe someday some bigger YouTuber can make a better video to spread more awareness of the series or something. With that said, it's the end of the video. Hope you have a good day and please do enjoy Rise of the Ronin. Wait, what do you mean you are not buying Rise of the Ronin?